This video is brought to you by Only Crit's new Kickstarter, more about that later in the video. At the beginning of 2020, I was getting ready to run a Curse of Strahd campaign that I ended up having to move online before all the other stuff happened. One of the players moved away, and so we realized this should be an online game, and then it was really going to be an online game. But I was very excited to run the campaign, and so I put together all the information that I could find about Curse of Strahd, which there is a lot of on the internet. There's a lot of fantastic advice, especially on Reddit. There's a very thorough community of people suggesting homebrew content and other revisions that you might want to make to improve your game. And I took all this information and all this data, and I printed it all out, and I put it in a big binder. Now, already, this is a waste of paper. I did not need everything in this binder at my fingertips at every point during the game. But you're going to see especially how much this is a waste of paper. First of all, also, I ran the game online. I easily could have looked up the Reddit articles and had them open in another tab. I didn't do that. I'm hoping that when I printed this out, I didn't know I was going to be running a digital game at the time. That's my only defense. Also, it wasn't my printer and it wasn't my paper, but that barely matters, right? Just because I did it at work or whenever. But I'm going to take you through this binder today. I'm going to take you through what I thought was so important that I had to print it out. And then I'm going to throw it all away. Everything from this, probably everything, is going in the trash. Because I don't even use this during my games. So I might save a couple things that are my own personal notes and things I want to reference for later. But I'm not really expecting to. Let's get started. I just want to pause here and thank my sponsor for this video, Only Crits, and talk about their new Kickstarter. Only Crits have been wonderful partners to work with. They've been the sponsors on a ton of my videos. They're a super awesome company run by some truly lovely people. And they're running a Kickstarter for a new line of fuck dice. Okay, I can explain. If you support the Kickstarter, you can get gorgeous sets of dice, the full 7 set of polyhedral dice, and a bonus d20 that have curses on them for when you're making a really important roll and you want the dice to communicate just how great it would be if you got a crit, or how bad it would be if you got a crit fail. You can get a d20 that has fuck me in the place of the 1, and fuck you instead of a 20. They also have an option that says yeet for the 20 and fuck for the 1. And if you're one of the first 150 backers for this campaign, you can get another bonus d20 for free. So make sure to act fast to get this exclusive bonus. And honestly, look at these dice. They are absolutely stunning, and they plan to unlock more dice sets as stretch goals throughout the campaign. And then you can choose from any of the unlocked sets once the campaign is over. So go to the link in the description and support the new Only Crits Kickstarter campaign, and you can make your dice as expressive as your favorite dungeon tuber, assuming I'm your favorite dungeon tuber, because I swear like a sailor when I play D&D, so I'm really excited to get my hands on these dice. Once again, the link is in the description, so go support the campaign today. Thanks so much to Only Crits for sponsoring this video. This video is also going to contain some major spoilers for Curse of Strahd, so proceed with caution. First of all, as you can see, this is very carefully tabbed. This is my very lovely title page, but I have all these tabs for every category. I have the characters printed out. Now, normally what I do, and I'll put this on screen as well, is I have the player's name, the character's age, their class, normally their background. In this case, the characters are children from our world who were pulled into the world of Barovia. So instead of their background, I marked their clique, because that made the most sense. And then their personality traits, ideals, bonds, flaws, their backstory, whatever information I have goes there. And then sort of the relevant connections, father, mother, and the connections to their characters as well. That's very important. And then any other notes for me for how I'm going to integrate them into the story. This is absolutely, if I was going to bring anything to a game session, this is very important to me. But for a digital game, I definitely don't need it. Next category is something called the hard questions. And because of the nature of the game that I was running, where I really wanted to dive into the drama and the pathos, I wanted to give my players an opportunity to really fill in a lot of those details. So I sent them basically a questionnaire that had things like, what's the worst thing that's ever happened to you? What's the worst thing you've ever done? What's one thing that would make your life better? Who's the most important person in your life? Who would miss you if you never returned? Who would mourn you if you died? Those are kind of important questions for a gothic horror isekai story. Who do you know, dead or alive, that you would never grieve over? I think my thought there was maybe those people might be related or connected to some of the villains in Barovia. I don't think I really ended up going that direction with any of those, but it's an interesting question. What is your greatest fear? Because, you know, if you're doing a horror campaign, that's kind of useful information. and what is your happiest dream? Again, these are meant to be written from the perspective of the characters. My goal is not to traumatize my players. And a lot of my players filled these out. Not all of them did, but I got a lot of good information. But I seem to have not printed the filled out versions for most of them. Maybe only 2 players filled these out. Or I just didn't print out the most current version. This is actually really useful. This was my guide for the campaign. I basically wrote down every important location in Barovia, and I wrote down what could bring the characters to that location. So for example, for one of them, it could be, okay, I know there's going to be one of the MacGuffins is going to be in this location, because I sort of rigged the draw for the tarot deck, so I know that's going to be a good excuse to get them out there. What are some other ways to get them to some of the other locations? Like, I knew, or at least I felt like I didn't have a good enough reason for my players to go and visit the winery, so my thinking was, well, I'll put one of the Fortunes of Ravenloft, link it to the winery, and that will push them to go to that location. So basically, the locations I wanted them to go to, but didn't have a good idea in my head of how to get them there, I put a fortune card, linked it to that location. That is not how I would run this game in the future, but that is how I ran this one. In the future, I would do the tarot readings differently, but I'll do a video about that in the future. I'm going to do a whole video about my lessons from this Curse of Strahd campaign, and what I'm bringing to my other Curse of Strahd campaigns. This is just how I ran this game. Was trying to think, how can I connect some of these locations to either specific characters, or specific subplots, or specific villains, or things like that. And then I marked down what things they need to accomplish in order to get leveled up. And I did used to use this, but I don't anymore. And the things they need to do in order to defeat Strahd. Oh, this would have been useful. These are the brides of Strahd, and all the notes I had on them. Oh well. They're all dead now. We are like 1 session away from the end of the campaign, and then my child was born. So I really need to get back to this game, but I don't have the time to right now, but hopefully soon. Then I had some notes for where we could take this campaign in the future after the characters return to their home world, but we're actually probably going to just have someone else run a game, because I'm going to need a break as a GM, and somebody else in the party has an idea for a game that they want to run for us, so this can go. Then I thought it would be neat to have a bit of an artifact of where did vampire lore begin. So I printed out The Vampire, a tale by John William Polidori, which is good. It's a good short story. Didn't really need to have it with me in my binder. I also read Carmilla in preparation for the game, and I read Dracula. Dracula, I have a hardback book of it somewhere in the house, and Carmilla was an audiobook, so thankfully neither of those got printed out and put in this binder, because I think that's the only reason that I didn't do that. Because it seems like I printed out everything else. This is advice from the Reddit, prepping the adventure, player characters and mechanics, advice for like curses and evil characters and personalizing Curse of Strahd, and there's great advice in here. I think I could have just taken some notes. PC Death in Barovia, that's really good, but I already knew how I was going to handle that for the most part, because I was a player in Curse of Strahd, and again, I'll do a video about that in the future. Okay, once again, if we're talking about things that I would actually justify bringing to the table, having the improvised damage page from the Dungeon Master's Guide, I do think this is a useful page for those of us who maybe can't keep that in our heads. Or maybe you could put this on an index card. This is something you could bring to the game, and I feel okay about doing that. Oh, wait, I didn't stop at just that one page. I printed out a few of them from this. Handling mobs, using miniatures, diagonal rules, chases. How many chases do I expect to happen in Barovia? Ending a chase, urban chase complications, wilderness chase complications, oh boy. Siege equipment, and then the Dungeon Master's Workshop, which is... Did I print this whole chapter? Oh, Mike. Oh, boy. I think I did. That's not necessary. Yeah, creating a monster. How many times? Okay, I didn't print out all of creating a monster. Okay, I ended at massive damage and lingering injuries. Okay, it's a little better. Now we're in for the good stuff, because I also printed out the entire Curse of Strahd adventure, and I put the whole thing in this binder. And then, after every chapter, I would pepper in the relevant Reddit articles that I wanted to save for that individual chapter. Let's begin. Oh, yeah, so this is stuff that's actually relevant to the game, and this is stuff that I would save. In this case, I don't need to save the map, because I have it digitally, Oh, and this is the one that had travel times written down on it as well. But I don't think I used these. Yeah, I'm not going to save that. This had how I was going to use the megaliths in the game, which I would not do the same way again, so I don't need to save these notes. This had Barovian names. I would use this again, and I will actually save this for a future Strahd campaign. And then this had, they found a creepy deck of cards, so I wrote down which of their faces appeared on the face cards for each of the deck of cards. I'm going to save this, because I need to digitize it at the very least. And then if they use their cell phones to try to reach somebody, there's a chance that it will randomly send a message to someone in Ravenloft, in Barovia, and I have that written down. So I'm going to save these. Okay. Introduction. Save that. Marks of Horror. I do actually think that's a reasonable thing to save. Saving the Marks of Horror section, having that printed out, does make some sense. Notes on running Strahd like an unholy terror by Guild's Bounty on Reddit. Good, it starts with the word disclaimer. I'm wordy, this is long. Which I don't think meant print this out and save it. Now there's a lot of great advice in here, but again, I kind of already knew how I wanted to play him. I think this is useful, but I don't consult this that often. I know the character of Strahd really well at this point. I definitely don't need to have it as a hard copy. Oh boy. Okay, this one is actually super useful. I don't have the author's name written down. It doesn't appear on the document, but it's about the dinner with Strahd, and it is actually really, really useful. And I used this one a lot when I was trying to figure out how to run the dinner with Strahd meeting the main characters. So I would recommend reading this for sure. Don't need it now, but it was useful then. Strahd's Negotiation by Sly Flourish. Okay, so this is a Sly Flourish article. And then running Strahd von Zarevich. I'm sure I did read these. I don't remember what information was in here that I incorporated into my version of Strahd, but something in here was, I'm sure. But I didn't go back to it that often to use it, which is sort of the reason I printed it out. Curse of Strahd, running the final battle against Strahd by Power Score RPG. Okay. So this is just how to run him as a badass, basically. Ah, okay. So this is, again, from Reddit. This is by Jonathan Writing. The Brides of Strahd. It's only a couple of paragraphs for each character. And the value of this is that it helps you think of each bride as a distinct character. I do think it's actually really valuable. This is something that I would actually consider keeping in my binder, because it's hard for me to keep those characters straight because they are not really written as anything particularly noteworthy in the book. So by having this document in my binder or notes or whatever, it would actually help me kind of visualize them as different characters throughout the campaign. Stages of Vampirism for PCs. Okay. Okay. The Artifacts and Madame Ava's reading. So I printed this out. This was how I presented the information to them, which I think is useful to have. Once you're running the game, I would definitely have some sort of sheet that keeps track of what cards people pulled, what each card reading actually said, like what was the words and the verbiage, and the actual information, like where is this stuff, which is the thing that I actually don't have included, which is kind of funny. I didn't actually write down what these things meant, but I knew what they all meant. Okay, but if you're going to do a rigged reading like I did, you don't also need to print out all of the other card reading options. I don't know, man. Oh, well, I did print out the entire adventure, so that's why. That's why I had that. Okay, here's some notes from Guild's Bounty on Dr. Rudolph van Richten, the legendary Slayer. I don't know how much I used this. Again, I think the character was just sort of baked into my head by the time I was running the game, and so I'm sure some of this made an appearance. And some of what these articles do is they just consolidate the information that's, especially if it's available in other resources, like other books or novels or whatever, but especially just, okay, what is the information that we can glean about this character from the text in Curse of Strahd that maybe isn't obvious because it's not all presented in one location. So that is really useful. And likewise, we have some information about Esmeralda, but I think I just stole the version of Esmeralda who appeared in the game that I was a player in, so I don't know how much I used this at the end of the day. I'm starting to realize how much of this I printed out with the intention of reading it in the future, and I didn't. This is my favorite map. It's on the DM's Guild. It's my favorite version of the Ravenloft map. Hey, look! For the first time, a note of mine included on one of these pages, something that would actually help justify the reason I printed it out. This is on the hanged body that the characters cross paths with. This was me writing down which character it should be. Now I don't feel like I wasted paper. Oh, look, there's another one right here. Oh, cool. Okay. So for this Madame Ava's tent in the treasure section, for the D20 roll, it says 1 magic item, roll once on the magic item table B, and instead I just wrote down, I guess, whatever result I'd come up with, which is a greater potion of healing. This is an article that's actually really great. I would recommend you read it. It's Pool Table Dungeon Mastering in Barovia by Sly Flourish. It talks about how the different factions can basically bounce off of each other. It's really useful. I do recommend it. I'll try to make sure to link everything that I name drop during this video, because I do think it's all useful. If I can still find the links, they'll be in the description below. Here's an Adventurers League guide, I guess, for Ravenloft. This is useful because it gives you Jenny Greenteeth, and Jenny Greenteeth is another character who can appear as basically another magic item vendor, essentially, and another person who can help resurrect bodies. And that's the real reason I included her, because then I pivot to Death in Ravenloft, which is, this is some more information that I got off of, I think this is the DM's Guild, some expanded lists of dark gifts that can happen when your characters are brought back from the dead. Now we're back to Reddit material, Guild's Bounty, information on the werewolves of Barovia, and the different forms of lycanthropy and how they could work in your games. I don't even know if I would go with this approach at this point. Pointy Hat did a fantastic video about another approach to lycanthropy, and I might go with that method instead. I would kind of compare and contrast, but this is a valuable read, for sure. Likewise, he did an article about the were-ravens and sort of their behavior in Barovia. Vallaki is basically the same, but I do have a note here of a religious figure that I included in Casimir's tent because it was going to be relevant to one of the characters. There you go. Now we're dungeon mastering. I hope my point is clear. I could have just put these post-its inside the physical copy of the book instead of printing out a PDF and putting the notes in that way, because there is virtue to putting these notes on the individual pages we're going to be looking at the information. But this was not the way. Ruins of Perez. Ooh, I have a little note here. A little, one of the little arrows you use when you let people know where they should sign on a document. And I marked down which relic was going to be located there. Cool. Oh, here's another one. This one was really important. I marked down which of these sarcophagus was connected to the Warlock patron. That's really useful. That's a great note. Okay, I have a lot of notes for the Death House, because it's how I introduced the campaign. This is actually the first thing any of the characters experienced, and it's how they got their items and all their gear. So I had a lot of notes in this section, because it was the first session. It was really important. The first couple of sessions. The monsters and NPCs, and then I've got a few different versions of Strahd in here. I honestly have not really found a version of Strahd that I've been happy with, but I'm about to run him for my party whenever we get this final session scheduled, so I'm going to need to commit to one of these, which I really haven't done. But anyway, I have the PDFs of these, and I'll just run them off of that. Sly Flourish wrote an article about vampires, but he also has since written about vampires for the MCDM book Flea Mortals, so I'd probably steal some of those, or use both. But this is actually really useful. I would actually recommend, if you're running Curse of Strahd, go find his article about vampires. Again, I'll put that in the doobly-doo below. Sly Flourish's vampires are useful. Don't tell me. Wow, I really just printed the entire book as was. What was I going to do with this? This is the Taroka deck appendix from the end of the book. They want you to be able to print this if you want to, but their thinking is, you're going to do something with it. Handouts, again. I think they want you to print these. I rewrite handouts at this point, because the handouts in this book are just illegible. We'll talk about that another day. We will definitely talk about Curse of Strahd in a lot more detail in multiple videos. And a list of monsters by challenge rating across all of 5th edition at the time. Not a bad thing to have. I would bring a version of this to my games, probably. But I don't know, this is a lot of, maybe not the most useful way to find information at this point. Well, that'll clear up some space on my desk. Hello, it's Editing Mike, and I wanted to jump in here at this point in the video and talk about the lessons that we can learn from what you just saw, because there actually are more than I thought when I was recording. See, the reason that I made this video at all is because we're about to turn my office into the nursery, and I need to start consolidating and getting rid of some stuff, and you're going to see another video on Monday, I think Monday, where I get rid of some more stuff and just purge some of the things that I never used for my games. And so I thought this would be a fun opportunity to see what I thought I was going to use for this Curse of Strahd game and never ended up using, and sort of take you on a tour of the sort of wasted potential. But there's some more lessons here than I thought there were going to be. Because obviously, the first lesson is don't waste paper. I don't think anyone needed to hear that lesson, but, you know, I think it's a valuable one. But also, when I talked about the documents that I actually would use from this campaign, there's two things to take away. One of them is that I should have just saved all these as PDFs. I talked about the Dinner with Strahd advice, and I actually can't find a resource for that online anymore. It seems like it's been deleted. So I fished this document out of the trash in case I want to use it again in the future, but obviously I ripped it out of the binder because I was making a big dramatic thing, and it's not really usable. I have to take notes on this and come up with my own takeaways that I can incorporate, or maybe just scan this or something. I wish I just saved this as a PDF. I honestly should have done that with everything that I printed out, because not only would it have saved paper and made it a resource I could have looked back on, but it would have archived these things in a way. I've talked about this before, but years ago I printed off a bunch of Chris Perkins' blog posts that were on the D&D website and are no longer available except through the Wayback Machine, and I have printed out versions of some, but not all of his articles, because that was how I used to save things. They're in a box in my garage now, but I wish I'd saved those as PDFs as well, because it would have been so much more valuable to be able to pull them up at a glance and not cost storage space. This, not just wasted paper, but also storage space in my room and in my office, and it is not the most efficient way to keep track of these things. If there's something that you find online that you want to look back on and reference, save it as a PDF right away. Don't link it, don't print it out, just archive it. If I'd saved it as a PDF, I basically would have future-proofed it. But the other lesson is, if you're gonna save things that you should read for your D&D campaign, you should actually just read them. My philosophy when I was making this binder was I was gonna take these documents and incorporate them into the adventure, like, okay, here's the section on Castle Ravenloft, and then immediately following it is the printout of the Dinner with Strahd and the brides and everything that's sort of relevant to that section of the book. It's going to go right in after. It's all going to be neatly together. That was the theory. And so my idea was, okay, when I start prepping this game and when I'm prepping each new session, I'll go to that point in the book and I'll flip through the binder and I'll look at those materials as well. But that didn't happen because that wasn't how I ran the game. I didn't use the binder. Now, on the one hand, that speaks to the way that my prep for this campaign evolved and changed and sort of truncated as I would be prepping games sort of last minute, and I would just pull up D&D Beyond, or I'd grab the book because it was easier than trying to deal with the binder, because the binder is unwieldy and it's well organized, but that doesn't make it easy to use. But also, some of these documents that I was talking about were just too unwieldy to quickly slap on at the end of my prep. They required a little bit more thought than that. You know, there's information in there about how to run Rudolph Van Richten, or how to run Esmeralda, or how to run Strahd, and some of those are major campaign-changing recommendations. They actually can shift how you plan to structure your story, or how you plan to have your characters interact with them, sometimes in ways that would actually impact their backstories and things you'd wish you'd set up properly. Not necessarily across the board, but just enough that it didn't always seem worth it. And it was also just out of sight, out of mind, like I said earlier. So this method just didn't work. The idea was interesting, but what I really should have done instead was either make a note in my physical book and put a little post-it note and say, hey, make sure to look up Sly Flourish's vampires or the Were Raven advice from Reddit. But again, if I'm just prepping the game through D&D Beyond, that doesn't really help me there either. And it turned out that D&D Beyond was a pretty convenient way to prep, so this approach wouldn't have worked. The better advice actually would have been just read this stuff in the moment, rather than printing it off and saving it for later. Because this is something that I know about myself. If I try to set something aside for later to read it, I have to make an effort to do that. And this is something that is true in a lot of respects. A lot of these books are going into the garage in a couple of weeks at most, and some of them I have not had the chance to read yet, and I need to actually put videos on the schedule to go fish these books out and read them, because otherwise it's going to be out of sight, out of mind. Sometimes it kind of already is. And I can't speak to whether this is a problem that you have in your games, but I know it's one that I've got with mine. I put work off too late, and specifically, I have ideas that I think would be interesting to dive into, but I don't give myself the time in advance to do them. There's a whole conversation to be had about whether or not we should have to prep our games that far in advance. Like, obviously the ideal is you can just prep a game with an hour beforehand, and you don't have to have a whole, I adjusted the binder, but the binder's gone now. You don't have to have a whole binder full of material that you're referencing and take maybe a whole day working on incorporating that material into your next session. The goal is to not have to run your game that way. And that is a reasonable critique of published adventures, is how much lead time they require, how much prep you have to do in advance before the game actually begins. But the benefit of that is you're actually prepared. This is sort of the middle ground. It's something that I'm going to be exploring kind of a lot. My goal going forward is to run more published adventures because they are easier for me in a way, but that's only the case if I take time in advance and really knuckle down and do more prep than I did here. So in addition to doing videos about my Curse of Strahd campaign, which I'll dive into a lot more detail in the future, I'm also going to do videos where I take a published adventure, maybe a long campaign like your Tyranny of Dragons, maybe something short like Lost Mine of Phandelver, and I really break down everything that I would do to prep the campaign and all the different steps there are that I do before the players are even involved. And I think this video is going to be really interesting as a sort of what not to do. I can't speak to whether it spoke to any of your personal issues when you're running your games, but it definitely exemplifies a lot of my own flaws as a dungeon master. Specifically, hubris. This thought that I will absolutely be able to incorporate all this material and I won't need a whole bunch of time in advance to do so. I can do it on the fly. I can just pull it up in the middle of a game and add it right in. No, I can't. I have many skills as a game master, and improvisation is definitely one of them, but it actually works against this style of prep. If I'm in the middle of a game and I don't have the information I need, I'm just gonna make it up. I'm not going to take the time to read a document while the players are sitting at the table. I'm probably not going to do it when I only have an hour before the game. So this format, this style, was a huge failed experiment. That being said, I hope it was an enjoyable video. I hope you enjoyed taking a look behind the curtain and getting to see how I failed to prep a campaign, because I think the campaign itself wound up being a lot of fun. We haven't had the final session yet, like I said, but overall, I've really enjoyed running that game, but this binder did me no favors, and this style wouldn't work for me again in the future, because it didn't work for me for this game. And we'll unpack that some more in some future videos as well, but I would love to get your thoughts. What did you think? Is there anything that we talked about in this video that you thought might seem helpful? Is there anything in here that you wanted me to talk more about as far as why it didn't work, or expand on how I would make it work in the future? Because that's going to help me shape how I talk about this subject some more in some upcoming videos. Make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you can catch those videos when they come out. Like I said, I think on Monday, possibly Thursday, but more likely Monday, I'm going to do a video breaking down a bunch of my old notebooks about D&D material that I, once again, you're going to see a lot of hubris in that video as well. But you should subscribe so you can catch that video when it comes out. Make sure to check out my Patreon and join my Discord server and sign up for my newsletter so you can catch any updates I have coming out. Make sure to check out my recent video where I talked about how to create Caleb Widowgast as a Pathfinder character. That video was a ton of fun to make, and it didn't do amazing in the algorithm, so if you can go show that some love, that would be great. Until next time, play fair and have fun.